Excellent. Eugene, welcome to the Data Chaos Podcast. I really appreciate you joining me today on this Friday for a nice conversation.
Hi, Tyler. Thank you. Excited to be here.
Well, good. Before we start, I was looking through, obviously, I've known you for a number of years. um,
A
and
very large number.
very large number, right? And it was funny. So I was going through your background and I was like, hey, I want to start with FaceTime and move forward. I printed out your resume from LinkedIn. You don't have FaceTime on there.
I think I'm getting to an age where you kind of start keeping only several last gigs on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, I mean, because obviously for us, it was a long time ago. And for, listeners wondering, did these guys work at FaceTime like the Apple product? No, it wasn't. We actually worked at a company called FaceTime Communications where we did, at one point, auditing of instant messaging and compliance. And before that, we were basically a chat-based call center, similar to LivePerson, right?
Yeah.
That was us for a while. You were predominantly a software engineer there, and if I look at looking at your resume is pretty incredible. You have been a 3-time co-founder. You were in data engineering even before data engineering was cool. You've been let's see here. You were at Great Expectations of head of product. You were at Directly as the lead data scientist. You were at Jawbone as the principal data engineer. You're now at Loris as the head of. When I talked to you last year, the head of product, but now probably very excitingly, you are now the head of AI.
Yep. Yep. There is a whole story there as well. Yeah.
Well, where do we want to start? Let's start with this. How about you? When you and I worked together, back when there was still MS DOS and all kinds of other crazy stuff, you're senior software engineer writing Java. And what was the transition after leaving FaceTime? What got you? Because it looks like you went right into data. Kind of like walk me through some of that.
It's really funny because sometimes your story is kind of planned up front. And I know some people that actually are able to do that and heads off in front of them. For me, it's usually not true. So for me, the story is kind of emerges more when I'm looking back because I'm usually following my interests, right? So like background, like I studied computer science, like software engineering. When we used to work together, it was kind of Java, mostly backend, backend software. But I always was interested in data and in human language. And looking back, those two interests going through everything I did. Because right after FaceTime, I actually did go to a startup that was doing early kind of machine learning for language in the area of HR. So basically parsing resumes, parsing position descriptions, matching people, creating a tracking software with machine learning for HR departments. I was doing engineering there. I was doing algorithms there. And I think the third interest of mine was I was always interested in what people want. Like for me, it's still a mystery. Well, figuring out what makes people tick, what they want in terms of product. And I'm saying that I was a product manager before I was called a product manager, especially when you're working in startups. It's very difficult to divorce yourself from what this thing that you write is actually going to do. For some person developing particular value, solving particular problem, and especially when I was a co-founder, actually after that of a telephony over telephony over IP company called Jackster. There I was
Correct.
well there was yeah.
You did a bunch of stuff, but correct me if I'm wrong. There's a little bit of, I think, a little bit of fame here on the Jackster one. I think I was reading somewhere that y'all did the very first Google Voice integration.
Yeah, that was a very nice hack. It was amazing. It was like playing with a SIP protocol. It still exists, right? I
Yeah,
think so. I
still
just
exists.
got,
It's SIP.
yeah, okay, good. I just got tiny bit
Yeah,
kind of further from voice lately, so
yeah.
so that
SIP
was
exists. SIP is still around, of course. I mean, it's still prevalent everywhere. And Google Voice is still largely there. And then there's also a fee now. So yeah, those are they haven't gone dinosaur on us yet.
cool. So Jackster was was just extremely exciting because that was my first startup, like as a co-founder. There were three co-founders. One was kind of more on the business, kind of business and VC side. Another one was like subject matter expert from telephony, and I was the technical co-founder. And that was an absolutely crazy ride. So I remember that in the days when Facebook was signing up about 100,000 people a day, we were signing up, I hope I'm not lying, something about between 50 and 60,000 people a day. So all the, like there is this class of engineering problems that people usually say, well, it's a good problem to have. Let's not even think about it. Premature optimization. I agree. But in this case, we had to deal with all of those problems in the database, in the backend, in caching, in fraud, all of those like almost like interview style problems we had to solve. Like, what if? Well, no, it's not what if. This is happening.
This is
Uh,
now.
this is, yeah, actually, it's a funny story. So, company that you worked for, Twilio, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with Jax, it was a crazy ride because basically we figured out how to make international calling cheap by using normal telephony, the POTS, right? At the point of origination and termination, and then place most of the call over IP. And we had a lot of we had a lot of numbers in all countries, right? So you basically mapped a number in one country to a number in another country, and it placed the call this way. Um, we were growing extremely fast. Actually, our VCs wanted to grow us fast. We did go through a lot of capital. That was very Silicon Valley kind of style story. Well, it wasn't Silicon Valley. So after all,
Yeah.
and then and of course, VCs were kind of saying that, well, just keep, you worry about growing, it will be fine. So we actually our CEO was Konstantin Garike from LinkedIn. So all the ideas about viral marketing got kind of imported from there. It was really working so well. Users were inviting users, everything was growing. 3 minutes was kind of this currency of, actually we call them jacks, kind of our own currency. Everything was just humming, including the servers.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
2007 and 8 happened. Uh, and of course, then our VC said, well, wait, guys, you probably should monetize. And it's like, okay, yes, but we're growing. And unfortunately, we could not monetize fast enough. In the end, the company was sold, but not a good financial outcome. However, and here's why I mentioned Twilio. So I remember that in the very end, we were kind of sitting, thinking, okay, like what can we like? Obviously, this is not working because we're running out of money. But we built something so valuable here. What can we do? And one of the things that we built was a platform that allowed, let's call them normal software engineers to
Mm-hmm.
write phone applications, right? Because the problem was that like I was hiring engineers, I could not hire telco engineers because they thought that we're not serious. Like, you just software people. I worked at Ericsson. It's like, who are you? Right? And I couldn't hire normal software engineers because they didn't know the protocol. So we kind of wrote this API that was basically, okay, start a call. Here's a call, like connect this, play this, hang up, start, right? And we were able to hire like normal experienced software engineers to write telco application without understanding the underlying protocols of telco. And it's one of the kind of sessions when we were discussing what can we do about it, we were saying, well, it's like we did it. I mean, I bet there will be companies that probably will want something like that too. It didn't go, unfortunately. So, of course, well, as usual, ideas are dime a dozen. Execution is everything. But I still, in my Evernote, have a screenshot from a whiteboard that basically describes this idea. So
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
like I wonder how close that screenshot was to the sort of famous pizza boxes that Twilio had from their early days of architecture. So there's some Twilio lore you may or may not know about, but we have it's probably still in headquarters there somewhere if they still have offices up in San Francisco, but they had these pizza boxes where they had drawn like early architectural diagrams. And it'd be interesting to take yours and like see how close it was because I think if that was 2008, 2009, that was probably still before Twilio and Jeff Lawson had even started it.
That's
If I remember
amazing.
correctly, if I remember correctly,
Well,
because I
as we
joined you.
know,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like as we know, again, like ideas are really dime a dozen, and yeah,
Uh, selling is hard.
yeah, and yeah. Since then, I kind of kept going into either co-founding companies or uh, well, or being somewhere early. Actually, once I tried a larger startup. Well, it wasn't actually. I don't know if at this point technically, Jobone probably wasn't even a startup at this point, right? Because it was like serious, some kind of large number in the alphabet. We were probably close to 400 people. Uh, yeah, but and I felt that even that was probably a bit too big for me because
Oh
I
yeah.
just absolutely love that startup phase where everything is together, the ideas, the technology, the figuring out who needs it and, well, if anybody needs it and how we can help them. Also, I kind of gravitated towards B2B, or at
Yep.
least business use cases, because I think I gave up on the hope of figuring out what consumers want. Simply because,
They're
just
finicky.
like,
Like consumers,
well,
people, yeah, no.
well,
Businesses like they've got something to solve, right? So they're a little more set in their ways where humans are finicky and it's they it's like, put a finger in the air and which way is the wind blowing? Well, that's cool today and it sucks tomorrow, right?
exactly. Or it's like, what does it take to write a popular song or to create a popular movie or a popular, to write a popular novel? Uh, I'm not saying that there is no algorithm. I'm saying that the algorithm is not known to me. However, in B2B, you actually can figure out what people want, what people value, how much it's worth to them. Everything is much more, well, logical.
Yeah, trying to describe people as logical. Not so much. Businesses, probably I could see that. I could definitely see more. So it was funny, you mentioned sort of you love that early stage startup and you like the going from probably, I've heard it coined 0 to 1. I heard it stated the other day a little bit differently, which was an interesting analogy, which was all companies are born dead and it's up to you to bring them alive. And so when you start something from nothing, you have nothing. There's no heartbeat. A heartbeat being revenue. There's nothing to sell. There's no product. So that maybe is the body, however you want to call it, if we're trying to stick with the human analogy. But it was like everything is born dead, and you're given basically some resources in the terms of capital and people, and it's up to you to bring that business alive
Oh, I
or to
so much
life.
agree. I literally say usually this to team members, right? Like, okay, like if we're a startup, by default, we are dead. Okay, let's go from there.
Yep.
And doing a startup requires this very unusual mindset, right? Where you have to hold two opposite ideas in your mind simultaneously. Like, on the one hand, you know that, yeah, by default, you're dead, you're a startup, the like statistics are against you. And in the same minute, you have to be optimistic, you have to be determined, you have to be hopefully happy. That usually helps to produce good work. Very opposite ideas. And like for me, it took some time to figure out how to do it, but I feel like it serves me so well everywhere beyond work. It's just a good mindset.
Yeah, I mean it's a tough mindset, right? It's everything is against you. Everything, all statistics, selling, building something, people, everything is just it's stacked up against you. But at the same time, you love it so much, you enjoy how hard it is, you enjoy that challenge, you have that fear of failure. You have that drive to say, I don't care what they say it can't be done. I'm going to make sure it is done, and I'm going to figure out how to make it be done and ship this thing and build it and just get it out there.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. 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 So since then, I mean, it's been mostly startups, and more and more getting into kind of data, machine learning, and particularly human language. That's definitely
Yeah.
the kind of threads that are going through everything I do. Uh, and like it's been extremely interesting for me, right? Because human language is kind of at the, I mean, it always was at the forefront of AI. Um, and what we see in the last several years is truly just amazing, right? So it's
Yeah.
actually, well, maybe, okay, maybe we can talk tiny bit about that, right? And maybe then about product management, right? But so my last job before my current thing was head of product for Great Expectations, which is an open source software for data quality. And I absolutely love the team. Again, it's a startup. It's great. However, it wasn't really about human language. And I was, and I kind of, when I felt like that I'm kind of done with one of, I think it's called like tour of duty at the startup where we
Mm-hmm.
got to a particular
Yeah.
point, I
Yeah.
knew that I want to really get back into natural language, especially because I've seen what is going on. Like I've seen that the development is no longer like linear or like it just all jumps, right? Like basically things that previously 4 or 5 years was impossible to do with AI in language, or either impossible or you had to be Google with like hundreds of PhDs and unlimited money.
Yeah.
Suddenly it's becoming possible with a kind of small smart team. And now the challenge is not so much coming up with next foundational model, but with figuring out how to productize the capabilities that today's model give you. Uh, and this actually kind of is related to product management, right? Because uh, the more I started working with data and AI, um, I started getting more into product management because product managing, let's call it a deterministic product, like a normal, more traditional software, and product managing probabilistic product are related skills, but it's not the same skill, right? Because like how you treat specs, how you treat errors, how you treat expectations, everything changes. How you communicate. It's so important, for example, in ML-based product to build trust with your user, right? Because the same, like every model has errors, of course, right? Um, how do you position it can change whether you succeed or not, right? Because, well, let's say, like in any model, you probably like define some kind of precision and recall, right? So, well, first of all, explaining to the users what it means, understanding what you can expect, and what's good, what's bad. Like it's 80, is zero point 0.8 precision good or not? Well, depends, right? I mean, it's like if you are creating an autopilot for, for a self-driving car, well, it would be probably lethal. If you
Yeah.
are writing a game, it's probably good.
It's close enough.
Yeah, close enough. Exactly. Yeah.
Close enough. Yeah.
Yes.
That's no, that's I mean that's it's interesting because, as you've sort of your career has weaved, right? It's always brought you back to this core technology, which is around the natural language and the usage of natural language. And now you're in a position at Loris, your current company, to really apply that in the sort of latest models, in the latest generation of this tech, to something that is fundamentally human to begin with, which is conversations between two individuals in a call center. So
Exactly.
tell
Yes.
tell me a little, yeah. So let's dig into that a little bit more, because you went there. So you joined Loris AI, right, as head of product. I know we're jumping around here a little bit, but I think I want to talk about Loris because I think this is the most, the thing you're probably super passionate about, as I can tell. You're there head of product. We had talked a while ago. We were looking at building insights, data, everything else like that. You're dealing predominantly with that, and now AI explodes on the scene. And so like year and a half ago, maybe almost 2 years ago, it's creeping in, but it's not quite there. Now it's here, it's in full force. You're now head of AI at Loris. How has all of that fundamentally changed your thinking and where you're at and what you're
So
doing?
maybe just a couple of words about like what we do, right? So, and I
Yeah,
think in any startup, you can describe what you do at least on two levels, like pure business level, who we serve, how, and then beyond the business, like why is it interesting, even if we didn't make any money. I hope that we do make some money. So
it
um,
helps.
it definitely helps. So on the, especially those things are related. So on the business level, it's whenever you call support and you hear well, this call may be recorded for quality and training purposes. So we are the quality and training purposes, but not only for calls, but also for chat and email. Basically, we help CX departments, so customer support departments, to get interesting metadata about their conversations with their customers in order to assess quality of their support, create some kind of culture of continuous improvement, and in order to train the agents better. But training the agents, it's only one of the possible improvements, right? Because sometimes you have to change your product, change your policies, update your content, and there is no like one silver bullet there. So that's on the business level. That's on the business level. On the beyond business level, the analogy that I use is something like I usually ask people like, well, how much do you know about tango? Okay, and usually people, like most people, don't know much about tango. And I ask, well, imagine I show you a video clip of of tango, and I ask you to commentate. Like, I don't know much about tango, so I would probably say, well, I mean, it looks amazing. Yeah, it's like yeah, people like dance, and it's very cool. However, if you ask the same question from somebody who is like a dance instructor or an expert, they would probably, for every second in that video, they would tell you what is going on because they understand that this is a sequence of well-defined moves. Every move you can describe, you can evaluate, the sequences make sense, and it becomes very, very interesting. By the way, sometimes hearing commentators describe, anything, whether it's boxing or tango or anything else, even if I don't know it well, it's just fascinating. So, same thing we want to do to conversations, to business conversations, right? Because a conversation in business context is again this very like it's a dance where you can define different moves. You can define which sequences make sense. You can define how do you respond to a particular question. Because the wonderful thing about customer support is that uh, almost every conversation in customer support that you can imagine probably happened before. So this
Yeah.
repeatability gives you this gives you this power, and for us to define those moves, this language of conversations, this I mean science of conversations really, and applying it to business, that's of extreme interest to me.
No, that's very cool. I don't think I've ever heard, conversations between a support rep and the person calling in with the problem described as a dance in the form of tango, but largely it is, especially if you probably break it down to the repeatability, to the scientific nature of it. It's slightly rehearsed on one side, less rehearsed on the other side, but it's taken place in nature before. It's definitely happened.
Exactly.
It's not new. It's not new in nature, and so patterns, because it's taken place now, patterns can be developed, and the person on the side that's a little more rehearsed can now be trained to be better at that novice on the right hand side to help them either better articulate their problem or help them solve their problem. Is that?
Yes. So, like, just for example, like, we have this notion, what we call kind of conversational markers, right? It's
Mhm.
situations that, interesting situations that happen in customer support conversations, right? So, for example, when somebody is asking, well, can I talk to a manager? I mean, of course, that happens it happens, right? Or threatening a lawsuit, or threatening a bad review, or just expressing confusion. Oh, sorry, I don't get what you're saying. Can you repeat this, right? Um, all of those situations are interesting. CX people would love to know when they happen because you can analyze them and you can actually, they can lead what you improve. And doing it themselves with keywords is completely untenable, right? Because
Mhm. Yeah.
like think in how many ways you can express some kind of confusion. Hundreds. I mean, human language is so unbelievably rich. And with machine learning, you can train a model that can recognize all of those markers, uh, surface them into well, metadata and report. And now you can start answering questions like, well, let's see which topics are correlated more with confusion or anger. Like it's capabilities that you simply didn't have before unless you, well, unless you force your analysts to read or listen, I know, like thousands of transcripts.
Yeah, the Mechanical Turk, and that doesn't sound like that scales too well.
Yeah.
So, but you're okay. You were there starting off head of product. What was the move? Was it your move to say like, hey, AI is so important. This needs to stand alone? Because I would venture to think that as a head of product, the head of product at Lorsch, you can kind of you're overseeing everything. What was the decision to say, hey, I'm going to create this entire role called head of AI? What necessitated that? I guess.
So several things. So you actually kind of said one of them, right? That you know, AI is developing at such a speed, and it's so core to our success that you know we need somebody who would focus only on that. But it's not the only thing. We also a distributed company. So I'm in California. We have an office in Manhattan, and we have an office in Tel Aviv. Most of our engineering and data science in Tel Aviv. It's 10 hours ahead of me. I'm naturally an early riser. Like I usually start, my first call starts at 6 a.m. Um, uh, and that gives me probably 3, 4 hours of overlap, but it's still not enough, right? So it's always been
Yeah,
kind of
that's not much.
difficult, right? However, you know, like I was doing it like, of course, it's like hours were getting longer and longer and more stressful. In the meantime, we recruited an amazing director of product in Tel Aviv, uh, Ronan, and hi Ronan. So if you're listening, so it's just incredible, right? And at some point, those needs combined, right? So first of all, we need somebody like I would love to be able to focus more on AI, because with AI, like when you do product in ML, you cannot stay kind of high level. You must get into the data. You must get into the models. It's very difficult to just talk about needs without kind of getting your hands dirty. Um, and on the other hand, in the meantime, kind of Ronan was fully kind of inhabiting the position and building all the relationships and already leading everything. So we just went with this great. So he became head of product. I became head of AI, and things are really going better, like on all of those fronts.
Yeah, but can you really? I mean, can you really stay high level when it comes to AI? I mean, are you dealing with prompts? Are you doing prompt engineering? Kind of where's your interface with the LLMs as the head of AI?
So for the first, so when I was head of product, I think it took me 7 or 8 months before I actually installed all the Python machinery on my laptop, which was first time ever, right? Because
Right.
I'm used to actually getting my hands dirty, but I was so busy with all the non-programming stuff, right? Now I do have everything, but again, like I'm not playing a data scientist here.
Right.
However, I'm playing like I'm trying to preserve this very fine balance. Okay, I understand the business, I understand the users, I talk to users. But I need to understand the models that we're using. So, well, we use all kind of NLP, right? We absolutely, of course, we use LLMs, and of course, we do experiment with OpenAI, of course, right? And of course, we're trying to get an LLM in-house, but we also use all the models like from before that. And it's actually very interesting that most of the building blocks that now came together in LLMs we already used for years. But now just people are much more aware of this. So uh, I have to be able to see what a model predicts. I like primarily I deal a lot with definitions and validation of errors, right? Because with language, everything like, well, defining the question is well, it's a cliche, but it's true. It's half of solving the problem, right? So let's say, I don't know, just a couple of examples, right? So uh, one of the models that we have is a sentiment. It's a sentiment model, right? So as like kind of every customer message that they say or type, we assess on a 5-point scale if it's negative or positive. And usually, what the sentiment is targeted at, the company, at the agent, or something else. Just defining what's like, people kind of say, okay, sentiment, not a problem. If you start thinking what sentiment actually means, you encounter more questions than answers, right? Because is sentiment emotion? Well, in customer support, not exactly, because if you are sad, that's not necessarily what I'm going for. It's more about, it's about two things. One, satisfaction with your experience with the company and your emotional state. Why? Well, satisfaction with the company, obviously. Why, right? Because that's how CX department evaluates itself. And emotional state in order to manage efficient conversation, effective and efficient, right? Because
Yeah.
if you are very upset, if the customer is very upset, I, as a professional conversationalist, the agent, just like I guess hostage negotiator, have to come up, like before I just give you the information, I have to come up with some kind of de-escalation, right?
Empathize.
Empathize, but
Empathize, empathy, something. Yeah.
exactly, but it's not, but empathizing is not just saying I feel your pain. It's not necessarily apologizing, because if you're apologizing, it's very easy to fall into apologizing too much, and then the way it comes through, it's actually more negative than positive. It's human psychology, right? Okay, so this is just an example of defining what sentiment means. And then whenever our model spits out predictions, reviewing them, discussing them. Is it true? Is it false? Right? Um, so I don't necessarily deal with like core like technology of models, but it's more dealing with data. Now, I cannot imagine an AI product manager, let's call it this way, that does not do it. If you
Right.
don't look at data, I don't know how you can. I'm not sure how you can product manage an ML-based product.
Let's walk through like what does the a day look like for you as the head of AI at Loris? Like what you've got your laptop, you've installed all of this tooling probably in Python. You're probably writing Python now. You're dealing with all the data, but what's that day to day look like, and what does a good day look like in terms of coming up, outcome?
Well, I definitely try to talk to customers as much as possible, right?
Hmm.
Because with AI, you can do so much now, but figuring out what actually can help and what can be done in a satisfactory way, that's a lot of work. So half of my day is probably with customers or our customer-facing team. The other half of my day is with our data scientists in long conversations, reviewing kind of sessions, right? Like we review output of a model. We uh, make sure that we agree on definitions, how we test. Like as always with AI, right? You can kind of have a big dream, but how can we build something minimal? How we can create a sequence? Of course, well, it's product management, right? So with product people and engineers, I have to make sure that we do we do create some kind of timeline in ETAs, and something things must be predictable at some point, right? Which is a major challenge, right? Because um, that actually has been one of the recent changes that we made. So in product management or project management or engineering management, you always talk about ETAs, right? You always trying to come up with estimates, right? And I started understanding that in some projects, of course, this is the way to manage, absolutely, and you can get better at estimation. However, you have to identify if your project is delivery or an experiment, especially in ML. And if a project looks like an experiment, there's this expression, if you ask a dumb question, you will get a dumb answer. So on a completely experimental project, asking for an ETA or for an estimate, it actually might be a dumb question. And of course, data scientists will try to give you an answer, and then they will blow through this estimate. Not, it's not their fault, because sometimes, like, if the variance is very, very high, you don't know. So don't, and you can't pretend to know. How I'm not trying to defend the position of, oh, well, great. So if it's an experiment, we'll just keep going, and maybe we'll go for a year or 10 years or until we run out of money. We cannot do that, right? So,
Right. No, I was
um,
going to say you also have a business to run that requires capital or cash to be made. So that was like my question coming out of that is like, I get it. Like I like to treat things as experiment. Everything's an experiment until it's not. But at what point does an experiment either become product or get killed?
okay,
Because at some
perfect.
point, like you
Mhm.
said, like the experiment can't go on forever. Otherwise, you're just you're burning money at probably a ridiculous rate, and it's not bringing back in revenue, which we all need in order to survive. So, what does that look like? What gets killed? How does it turn into a product?
So you manage an experiment kind of like scientists manage experiments, right? So, well, because they have grants and they have money and time constraints as well, right? So you come up with, okay, we're asking a very big question. Answering this question might take months and months and months. Let's create a string of questions, string of hypotheses, starting from the very immediate and the smallest. And then, okay, so presently we will answer, we have a hypothesis, let's validate it. And then instead of an estimate, it's a slightly different question. How can we budget answering this question? 4 days or 5 days. Okay, so define the question, agree with data scientists, agree how we answer, agree on our definitions, agree on risks. In 4 days or 5 days, whatever we say, we have another review, and three things might have happened, right? Either the hypotheses have been validated, great, go to next question, or it was truly disproved, or we're saying, well, we actually need more time. So it's kind of managing this time in very small increments. And of course, as your confidence kind of goes up, you start getting closer and closer to productization.
Product.
Uh, like I actually have a good example, I think, right? So part of what we do is QA for customer support conversations, right? And so every CX org has QA that picks very small number of conversations. They have like a scorecard of questions of different behaviors that the agent must perform. And they manually verify, okay, did the agent greet the customer by name? Did the agent empathize with the customer's problem? Did the agent blah, 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 right? Of course, we want to make sure, and this way you maybe review, I don't know, 2% of your conversations, 3% of the conversations, and it's very demanding and like it's not great. We want to automate it, right? And of course, we had this idea that, well, if we give a transcript to an LLM, can it answer the same questions? Actually, this is literally, by the way, we are a distributed company, but this idea
Okay.
was appeared in a conversation that we had in Manhattan when we actually were together over lunch,
Well, I was going to
which
say
is
probably every call center is thinking to themselves, okay, there's this LLM, there's this natural language processing. When can I get rid of these agents? Take all of
ah
this training data, right? Like, because that's what it sounds like. That's where you're going, right? Is it at what point is the LLM or is a model going to be completely replace a real live human agent? Is that
uh,
is that sounds like kind of where you're starting to go, right?
so well, we are not doing chatbots, at least not well. Right now we are not doing any chatbots. I think to be a winner in this space, eventually you kind of have to cover like the entire surface of from chatbots to analyzing conversations and to everything, but you don't have to do it at once, right? Um, I actually on our blog I have a blog post that kind of says, well, what I think customer support org will look like in several years, and I don't think agents will disappear.
Mm-hmm.
I actually believe, and this is okay. I know that it's somewhat a controversial point, right? That uh, instead of completely chatbot or chatbot like voice or actual chatbot,
Yeah.
right, or autoresponder or completely agents, there will be a very interesting picture, right? Where there will be a very small number of agents. So let's say if you had, let's say, 500 agents, now you're down to 50. That, but people that are probably higher skilled, they're sitting in front of a very large monitors, kind of like flight traffic controllers,
Hmm.
and they're looking at conversations that are being handled by technology, and they kind of jump in when the technology gets stuck. Either the technology itself says, oh, okay, human touch is required, or there is a signal from the customer that it's more like I want to speak to a human. Uh, because so
I could
even
see
like
some.
the same conversation doesn't have to be a bot or a human, right? Because in any
Yeah,
conversation, and this is back to this science of conversation and moves, some parts of the conversation are very scripted. Like you don't
of
have
course.
to be there, right? And some conversations, some parts of conversations can be emotionally charged or very complicated, and that's where you need a human. But imagine that a kind of an agent or this support analyst, support, I don't know. I think they probably will not be even called agents. I don't know what this role will be called, but it just
Yeah.
jumps in, jumps out.
Well, I mean, the world that I think we're going to get to, which we're probably not far from, right? Is so like, say you go from the 50 down to the 10, and the first day on your job is you're going to speak to train a model on your voice. So it sounds exactly like you. And then when a call comes in, it's not talking to you, the agent, it's talking to your model at first because there's no video, so they don't know. And that person, like you said, is looking at the, air traffic control thing, watching all the calls that have come into Agent A. We'll just call Agent A for, lack of a name, or Agent Sally. So Agent Sally's voice has been trained in the model. Agent Sally's AI is answering all of these calls. And if Agent Sally sees something going totally sideways, she jumps in seamlessly because the voice is exactly the same. Is that kind of where things are going?
Uh, Possibly, and well, we're talking, well, so we're saying voice, but there is actually quite, like in the last several years, there has been a change, right, where it's more and more goes away from voice and to kind of chat-like interfaces, right? Because just
Oh
like
God,
you,
I hate those. No, they're terrible. No, I want them to. I think I have yet to have a good like the experience when you get, like you said, chatbot, and there was a part of me like I cringed because I think chatbot. I think that shitty robotic voice, which is like, "Hello, Eugene. Please enter your passcode now. Your
oh,
passcode has
no,
been
no,
verified."
no,
Like those
of
things,
course.
like those are just they
Oh,
suck.
no, 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 I'm
But
talking about
imagine,
chat,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
no, just
But
like you,
I don't even want to. I don't even want to do that. There's just times where like there's so many things, like anything having to do with your credit card or finances, right?
hmm
You don't want to do a chatbot, you want to
yep.
talk to a human. Your airlines get screwed up, you want to talk to a human. And so I'm kind of like thinking to myself, if you've got an LLM, if you've got a model that you can train on an agent's voice, and the vast majority of maybe those inbound calls are simple, they're handled by the training models and that person's voice, but it's not really them. And then when something does go really, really bad, that person's able to dial, connect it directly in. And now the AI is out of it, but it's the real human now, but it sounds exactly the same.
Most likely, yes. And that
Okay.
actually brings a very interesting question. Should the customer know that they're talking to technology or to a human?
Ooh.
It's not an easy question, by the way, right? Because I mean, I was dealing with AI for customer support a couple of companies ago, and there we actually had to deal with this. And I back then, at least, my opinion was that it's better to be upfront,
Yeah.
right? Because when a customer thinks that they're talking to a human, but it's actually a bot, then any slip causes this like really like I've been cheated here, right? Um, so
Does it become an ethical question? Is it a question of ethics, or is it a question of trust, or they kind of go hand in hand?
I think they go hand in hand, right? Because in customer support, actually, right, it's like one of the reasons I really like this field is that the goals of the company and the customers in the best possible scenario are not actually against each other. Like
Yeah.
even remember when I was talking about like this analogy of tango and science of conversations. I actually used to use boxing as analogy before that, and then it hit me that wait, it's actually like technically it's a good analogy, but in boxing, well, it's either
You're punching the
you
other.
beat
You're
me,
punching. You're getting, yeah.
right?
You're getting
In,
punched in
in
the face.
in tango, both dancers actually have the same goal, have a
The
really
same
good
goal, right?
number. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the boxing one is a little more as adversarial, and you don't want
Hmm.
adversarial in customer support.
Yes.
But it was interesting when you said when you brought up the point is, do you tell the customer or not tell the customer that they're first talking to AI? And it made me think of, I think I remember reading a study somewhere that said people talk horrible to their Alexa. They're super rude to their Alexa, even though Alexa sounds exactly like a human voice, but they know that it's not. And so they're super rude to it. And their kids were picking up on the rudeness and we're talking like this rude behavior. So I tend to wonder if you told them, so if you told the customer that, hey, you're dialing into our support center, you're going to be talking to an automated AI agent that sounds exactly like a human, but at some point a real human may come in. Would they just be completely rude in the very beginning? And how would they know if they sounded exactly the same?
Oh, that's such a good question. So first of all, yeah, I did hear about that, like with Alexa. I actually think that if you say exactly, actually, this is great. If you say that currently you are talking to a technology, to an automation, but the agent is right there, like at the finger of your fingertips, and might get in at any time, I think they would actually treat it as a human, would not be rude,
Yeah.
and actually achieve this kind of best of both worlds. Yeah.
I would hope because if all of a sudden they started off in this horrible manner, demeaning manner, degrading manner, and then they don't realize it's the agent. All of a sudden, the agent is like, "Whoa, wait a second! What the?" They all of a sudden start firing back at the person because they're like, "Oh, I'm talking to a real person. I'm sorry." And then maybe think,
Exactly. Oh, like, oh, I didn't know you were a bot. Like, I
I
didn't
didn't know
know you're
you're.
human. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't
like,
know. Yeah, you sound exactly the same. Well, no, I put Sally the AI over here, and now I'm really Sally, and you're hurting my feelings.
exactly.
Because
Yes, yes.
because yeah, because the AI
No,
is
like,
not going to have any. The AI doesn't
like,
care, but
like,
Sally's going to be like, oh my God.
but this is like a whole family of those unbelievably interesting questions that current state of
Yeah,
AI brings in, right? Just like, um, well, obviously, like with ChatGPT and everything, right? So the more people start using it, um, like, what does it mean? Right. So starting from, I don't know, like, let's say if you wrote a blog post and you let ChatGPT edit it, is it still yours? Well, yeah, I think that's not controversial, right? But
yeah.
if it wrote most of it and you edit it and then you agreed with it, and is it still yours? I don't know. Maybe the answer is that it doesn't even matter, right? But it's just like we never had to answer questions like that.
This is true. I've kind of gone with it slightly doesn't matter because it's made my life obviously more efficient and simpler if I'm having to write copy that I give it a bunch of ideas and I'm like, go give me 3 paragraphs on this that I'm going to put up on LinkedIn. Largely it comes out and it's like, it's okay. It kind of gets it part of the way there. And then I go in and edit it myself and make it sound maybe a little bit more like me. So it's this hybrid thing. And I don't know if I would be, putting a little asterisk down there, like I wrote part of this and so did, Llama version 6.5. I don't know. It's like, I don't know. But it's an interesting, time to be alive and a strange place to think about what is real versus what is not and what is mine versus the AI or the LLM and it's the way that it was programmed or the model it was trained on.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I think like being at the kind of in between people that develop this and people that consume this, it's like I've been like having so much fun, right? Because it's you have to both make it happen, you have to make sure that people understand it, you have to make sure that people expect something like something reasonable from this. I mean, it's been amazing, yeah.
Definitely. So let's get back. We were talking about a real world example
Oh,
where
yes.
where something was started off as an experiment and then I would like, hopefully we can have one that's like started as an experiment then turned into a product. Or how do you kill it, or
Mhm.
when do you decide to kill it? So we got off on a fun tangent there to talk about,
Yeah,
some of
so
the crazier future, but go ahead. Sorry.
let's talk about one that is turning into a product like as we speak, right? So okay,
Cool.
so we talked about every CX department does their QA, they have their own scorecard, and in the scorecard, so, and because I saw so many scorecards from different clients and prospects, you start seeing like every CX department comes up with their own, but if you analyze them, probably third or maybe half of the scorecard is kind of touching on the same things. It's not knowledge specific to the company, but what does it mean to be a good professional conversationalist? Like your empathy, your managing of conversation, like being concise, being clear, being empathetic. And then we started, like kind of really over lunch, thinking, well, first of all, why do they create those scorecards like each for their own? What if we came up with a scorecard that would just handle this, empathy, or I call this like good conversationalist scorecard. Um, and what if we actually evaluated conversations against it automatically using an LLM? It started, okay, then we started trying, right? So first of all, you need to assemble a list of interesting questions that, well, and validate them with possible clients, right? So like with always like, is it worth doing? Is it possible to do? Well, and then how much it will take to actually do it. So it started from very early interviews. It started being clear that yes, they would accept it, and it's very valuable. Is it possible? Well, we kind of started playing with ChatGPT, just giving it anonymized transcripts, asking questions like, okay, here's a transcript. Did the agent apologize appropriately? Did the agent acknowledge feelings? Did the agent do this or that? And ChatGPT started, like in its own way, giving answers. Sometimes incredibly insightful, sometimes completely bonkers, and sometimes in between, right?
It had
So we
that
st
hallucinating. It was hallucinating. That, I think, was what they call
that
it, right? Hallucinations. Yeah.
yes, reading those answers when it hallucinates, it's amazing. Um, it's just amazing, especially when you try to understand like when you ask it to extract goals and problems from customer
Mm.
messages, right? It's like I call it immediately. It's very easy for it to start climbing all the way up on the Maslow pyramid of needs. Like somebody says, like, well, I want like, okay, I want a refund, right? So I guess the goal of the ticket is I want a refund. But then, it comes up, well, the customer's goal is managing their finances efficiently. And not getting a refund is a problem preventing them from achieving it. I was like, oh, no, 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 no. If I don't stop
No,
you
no,
now,
no.
you will probably say that the goal of the customer is self-actualization, like all the way up on the pyramid. So, so,
Oh,
so we
that's wild.
started,
Yeah.
yeah, so we started experimenting with prompt engineering. Okay, maybe, by the way, I don't like calling prompt engineering, because engineering implies something much more repeatable and organized. But it's like a
Yeah.
prompt
Yes.
craft.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Prompt. Yeah. It's prompt crafting. Yeah. Crafting the
exactly. Oh,
prompts.
actually, well,
Prompt creation. Yeah.
so we start experimenting, right? Like basically how much freedom to give it, what context, what definitions to give it, giving it answers, right? Giving it examples, and slowly it started working. Right. So, but of course, but then we saw that we kind of came up with maybe like, I don't know, about close to 30 questions that would be good to put on the scorecard. As we started developing prompts, one of the questions in the experiment was, well, is it possible? Is it possible to get consistent answers? And let's watch ourselves how long it will take to develop this per question. And we saw that, okay, well, yeah, rolling out like all 30 plus, okay, that's not really feasible. Let's identify like, 4, 5, 6 most important ones just to roll out as like as well as an actual feature. We identified them, we're testing them on multiple customers, and this actually moved from an experiment to a feature that is already on the roadmap. We actually going to be, well, we want to release it most likely next month. And of course, there from the model, it starts. You have to think about product managing it in all other ways, right? So will the clients be able to edit them? Will the clients be able to pick and choose which line items they want? If they disagree with the decision of the model, can they mark it up? What will we do with this markup? Uh, like how to think about priority, what expectations to create. But yeah, that was a really good example of moving from experimentation to a product, and it's challenging, right? Because like as a PM, you always have to talk to, well, like as a head of, let's say head of product
Customers.
or head of AI,
Had a
right?
pro,
But
yeah.
but I also have to talk to my CEO, right?
Mm-hmm.
And managing those expectations is not easy as well, right? Because you kind of have to be very clear about what we know, what we don't know, uh,
Yeah.
where we can create an estimate, where we cannot create an estimate, right? So that's it's like you could say that it's still product management, but it's definitely an update on how normal regular product management is done.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Let's take a step back because you said something that was interesting to me. And it's something that we're thinking about too. When you talk about the flexibility of injecting prompts by your customer, right? Writing their own or being able to add to it or a little more autonomy. So it's not just a black box. It's something we've thought a lot about as well because we were sort of at one point, or it might have been me going down this point with my co-founder Nico, as we were thinking about how we can utilize it to better help people create metrics, insights, everything else on top of their data. I was sort of thinking about it from the standpoint of, hey, here are the metrics I have. Just go and do this magic and bring back a bunch of stuff. And it was designing a black box where Nico was more of the mindset of, hey, there are things that we should sort of pre-populate context in those context windows that are not going to change, but really allow them the flexibility to provide their own prompt crafting. Say I stayed away from engineering, their own prompt crafting to feed it into the context and feed it into the LLMs. What have your thoughts predominantly been on that?
So when it comes to this, good conversational scorecard, uh, we for now are not even taking the risk of letting clients inject their own prompt.
Okay.
Like we wanted to, right? Because that was kind of one of the first really happy ideas. Well, and imagine if they can create their own line item, and we'll just be able to automatically evaluate it on hundreds of conversations. Nirvana, amazing. Um, and then we saw how much kind of how much guardrails you have to build.
Mm-hmm.
If I cannot predict what they will say, and I'm not there to ask, what do you mean by what was it appropriate response or not? And the LLM will not do it. So for now, we're just going with a predefined scorecard, but it's defined in a way that it captures all the commonalities from many scorecards that we've seen. So it's a very interesting compromise.
Yeah.
Um, I like when we start experimenting with kind of more custom things, I would probably do two things. So first of all, yes, provide a lot of context that the
Mm-hmm.
clients cannot
Change, right?
change, right? And I would even and actually part of this context would probably explain how to understand the injected prompt. It's almost like
Yeah.
and the second thing would be to break the prompt into very small atomic parts, which actually is something that we are about to do now, right? Because yeah. So let's say like one of the line items in the scorecard is like, well, did the agent appropriately greet the customer, right? So appropriately greeting the customer is, I guess, well, if the name of the customer is known from the beginning, you definitely should greet them by name. If it's an anonymous chat, obviously it's just hide there, right? If it's starts as anonymous chat and then you authenticate yourself, right, you probably should use their name somewhere later. And we're talking about the simplest of possible behaviors, and already there are all those kind of tree branches going all possible ways, right? So creating very small line items, right, like greeting, or like just greet. I don't care how. Okay, greeting by name, using the customer's name somewhere in the conversation. Kind of very small tasks, almost like following the Unix technology, the Unix
Hmm.
philosophy of this, like small composable tasks, and then letting the client pick and choose what makes sense for them.
Because I guess, I mean, obviously the big fear here is if you open it up too much and you allow them to inject a bunch of prompts and the AI decides to eat a handful of mushrooms and provide back a bunch of hallucinations, and the agent just starts regurgitating those hallucinations as if they're correct answers, you could have a really bad a really bad experience with that particular agent because of the AI going off the rails.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
this line item, this scorecard, it's basically QAing and evaluating agents, right? So it's kind of high stakes, right? Because in the
Yeah,
end, those QA scores, they become part of people's bonuses, or like whether
yeah.
they're retained or not retained. So you can't allow too much. Like, well, it's not exactly autopilot in a self-driving car, but it's not a game either.
No, people's livelihoods are at stake, and then that company's reputation is at stake. Additional revenue could be at stake. I mean, there's a whole bunch of real world tangible items that could be compromised if that thing goes off the
Exactly.
rails
Yes.
or if something
Exactly.
doesn't
Yeah.
work the way it's supposed to.
Yep.
Interesting. So there must be just an incredible amount of testing and guardrails you're having to put in order to prevent that. And then if it does go off, what do you do to detect it?
So this is something that we are. So guardrails, yes. What you do to detect if it went off rails, and it doesn't apply only to this, right? Because we have multiple models that are built in-house, like
Mm-hmm.
well, models that predict CSAT, models that infer sentiment, models that infer those what I call conversation markers, kind of interesting situations in conversations, uh, models that predict contact drivers, like what was the main reason for this call, or call or chat or email. Each one of them, and most of them are built in-house. Uh, every one of those models have some kind of error rate. Um, sometimes because of problems with definitions, sometimes because problems with training sets, sometimes because of just inherent problems with the models themselves, and sometimes because the reality around this model changes, like
Yeah.
what's called kind of data drift, right?
Yeah.
Um, this is something that we are actively working on now. You obviously need some kind of monitoring. You need retraining, and you need robust user feedback. Now, with robust user feedback, um, this is where it becomes very interesting, right? And it's like, well, you have to work with UX people. Like we have an incredible designer on the team, and she's very good about like figuring out like those micro interactions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to make sure that when users give you feedback on your models, they don't perceive it as, oh, I'm working as an annotator for this provider. No, it's a data exhaust, right? Ideally they're doing something that they're interested in. And when they disagree with something, disagree with the prediction, it's they fix it for their own purpose, but for us it becomes a great feedback.
Reinforcement, basically reinforcement learning, right? And you can
Yes,
yeah.
yeah, and but this is all like building and actually this is what I think we kind of all discovered and we understand now, right? Is that um, our like the product of data science in our company is not just the models; it's the machine for
Mm-hmm.
building and improving the models. Because it's a very important distinction, right? Because it's not that like data scientists work, like everything is done kind of in the dark, right? And then the model is integrated into the product. Great. Okay, but what next? Right? Like how can you give feedback? How you can retrain the model? How you can keep it, on guardrails? So
Yeah.
it's the machine for building new models, especially that in language. Uh, I think a lot of interesting models can be defined, models, not basic models, but features can be defined
Feature.
by people who are not data scientists and not necessarily even work for our company, right? Like if we talk about conversation markers, right? So let's say when somebody gets an idea, oh, you know what? I saw that sometimes customers blame agents for like, I think you don't understand me. We don't have a conversational marker like that. And imagine that they start experimenting. Can I train the machine to recognize the situation? Do a search, come up with some messages, say, okay, this is a positive example, this is a negative example, say train itself. Like you actually can create a machine that would build those models
Models
in
for
response to a non-technical subject matter expert user. Now that's the holy grail.
which right. That's yeah. Because I was gonna say even sometimes you may not want your scientist training those models on something like that because they're far away from the customer. They're far away from the experience. So you could imagine if you took your most sort of proficient CX agents, folks with the most experience, and said, okay, what are the things that what can you extract out of their minds to train better models and allow them to provide that input that can, and then it actually goes out and does all of the training. That would be really cool.
Exactly. And remember, like how, like I believe that, yes, like from a 500 agent call center, you will go to 50 agent call center.
Mm-hmm.
The remaining 50 agents, well, let's call them support analysts. That actually can be this job, right? It's being this conversation engineers, right? Coming up, well, when customer says this, actually, this is the appropriate response. Let's train this. Let's verify this. It's not exactly the same skill as agent, but it's not a data scientist. It's not a data analyst. It's kind of very capable subject matter expert.
Yeah, they're more like behavioral scientists. They're different. They
They're,
understand the
they're
human. They
different.
understand the human psyche. Yeah, they understand the human psyche and the human nature, and they're probably more grounded in the humanity of it than the science or the math behind it.
Exactly, yes. And this
Yeah.
is like and every time you try to come up with this ML-based product where humans and machines collaborate in some kind of business use case, one of the most interesting questions is how to create a division. What work is best done by machines? Which work is best done by humans? Like the products that get this question right, they're more likely to succeed. And for us, it's still an open question.
Got it. So think of open questions. What are you most excited about that's coming up, say, in the next 6 months, coming out of Loris? Anything that you're just like, this is going to be groundbreaking, or anything you can talk about?
Things that I can talk about. So, okay, so I can maybe I can't talk about like specific features.
Sure.
Just it's a kind of our philosophy, like unless they're like they have dates and everything, right? Just to be
Right.
responsible team member. But I can talk about a flavor of this.
Okay.
So there are a lot of companies that are kind of AI in CX or AI for CX. When I think about what's different about us, the words that I usually use is it's opinionated modeling of the domain. Like we're not gonna come up with a new algorithm probably, right? We have very extremely smart data scientists, but like this is not our business, right? However, opinionated modeling of the domain, it's defining the questions. Just a short preview. So one of the things that we do is detecting contact drivers, right? So given a conversation, usually companies ask agents to manually create like a disposition tag, like what was the main topic of this conversation? Oh, it was about refund. Oh, it was about cancellation of subscription. It was about a problem signing up for something, right? So they can analyze it. So doing it automatically. And in order to, so you give us a lot of data. We already do it today, right? We kind of cluster it and we define, okay, here are the topics. And then based on that, we build a classifier. And then now you don't have to ask your agents to do it manually. It's done automatically. That works now. However, uh, when we cluster those topics, anything can become a topic, right? And so we started developing a theory. What does it mean, a contact driver? It's not any topic. Usually, when you contact customer support, you talk in language of goals and problems, like what you want to achieve, maybe what you wanted to achieve, what you're asking me, and why, and things that prevented you from doing this. So what we're working on now in while improving this content driver automation is first of all extracting goals and problems from raw messages and only then sending them to classifier or to clustering. This for me is an example, like my favorite example recently, that we didn't come up with any kind of new base model yet. Uh, Helping the model to pay attention to particular parts of the thing, of the text, improves the quality of the output immensely, right? So from my time at Great Expectations, I'm very much used to that. One of the most kind of bang for the buck things that you can do for your model, give it cleaner data,
Mm-hmm.
or more specific data. And so this is just a uh, preview about kind of most of our features will involve this opinionated modeling of the domain of customer support conversations, uh, cleaning data, helping models pay attention to a particular thing in the conversations, and going from there. Actually, one more related thing, right? So when people talk about LLMs, they always talk about summary. And this is one of my pet peeves, right? So because when people ask, well, can ChatGPT create a good summary of something? It usually makes me very annoyed because I don't believe that there is such a thing as just a good the best summary of a text. Because
I would agree with
what
that.
summary,
Yes.
oh, thank you. So what
Yes,
summary
I
is
agree with that.
good is driven by what do you care about? Like if you have a movie,
Yeah.
you can summarize it in 100 different ways. You can summarize it around the plot. You can summarize about how it makes you feel. You can summarize it against the level of excitement that it generates. Many different things, right? And this
This
is, mhm.
I was gonna say, no, I agree. The summary to me seems like a very personal thing, and a summary is an interpretation, right? It's an interpretation of either events that took place, like real events that took place in the real world, or it's a summarization of characters or words, from a book or a movie, anything like that. But it's all subject to interpretation. I mean, I have to, for the podcast, I take the transcripts and I run it through some AI and I say, give me the summary of this. And I can't tell you how many times I read that. I was like, that doesn't even sound like my conversation. It sounds like this completely alien thing that has maybe a few talking points that we got to, but it's half the time I would say I have to rewrite it or I just throw it out completely because it doesn't, I feel like it doesn't represent what I would expect a summary of a conversation to be. Because it'll be interesting when I take this conversation here and I'll run it through the same AI that I use,
I
or the
would
same
love I
tool
would
that I
love to
use.
see that.
I will share it with you. I tell you what, I will share it with you before I publish it, and we'll see. It'll be interesting to see, like, is that really is it really what we talked about? Does it actually capture our intent? Does it actually capture the emotion? Does it actually capture everything that took place, or is it just kind of this robotic? Well, I see some keywords here. I'm just going to put it together. Whatever.
So exactly. So we have this approach to summarization of customer support conversations. I call it it's guided summary, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's more like a question and answer game, right? So, well, like we will build it ourselves probably, right? Like I always like ChatGPT is awesome for just experimenting with things. Like when I
Mm-hmm.
think about the spec, when I think about whether it's even possible, right? And I kind of came up with, I thought about like what does it mean to summarize a customer support call? It's you have maybe 5, 6 questions that you definitely want to be addressed, right? Like, well, what this call, like, why this customer contacted us? Was it urgent? How did they feel about it? Did we get to a resolution? If not, if not, was there some kind of follow-up that was agreed upon? How did the customer was the customer satisfied with the call? Maybe a couple of others, right? So when you even with ChatGPT, when you ask it to summarize this call while addressing the following points, suddenly the quality of summary that comes out is like 10 times better.
I like that. I like that. I should play with that because I mean, a summary itself is just saying write a summary. it's pretty open ended, right? It's
Hmm.
you're leaving it open to a lot of interpretation and leeway. Whereas if you constrain it, it's yeah, you're seeing the outcome of that being far more useful and being far more actionable in the sense of, especially with CX, you want that summary to provide, you know, contextual representation with actionable insights that somebody may follow up on. You can understand, is it solved, is it not solved, did I leave the customer in a lurch, is my customer happier or angrier now, do I am my brand reputation taking a hit? There's all these things that you kind of want to look at and understand,
Yeah.
which also come into the scoring, of course, and everything else like that. But yeah, I could see how that's interesting. I should try that too. I should just say create a summary. So I'll take our conversation when I'm done here at some point in the next week. I'll say create a summary. Then I'll try to put in 5 questions that I want answered as
Hmm.
part of that summary and see we can sort of play around with it.
Because I think a really good way to model this, it's always like, imagine how a human conversation about the same topic would
Mm-hmm.
happen, and then put it in a prompt, right? Because imagine okay, like if you imagine that one agent is starting their shift, and they need to get from the agent that ends their shift, like, well, the picture, okay, like I'm gonna take over. Just can you summarize this call that I need to follow up on? So you would probably start asking those questions, like, what was it about? Or like, so was it resolved? If it was resolved, maybe I don't even need to know about, right? If it's not, then what else? So it's possible that even in different use cases for different people, the same call can be summarized in the most effective way, slightly different, or maybe not even slightly different, very different.
Probably very different. Yeah. Depending on who's going to read it and who's going to interpret it and who's going to want to do something with it or just, like you said, cast it aside.
Exactly, yeah.
Super interesting. Well, Eugene, I appreciate you hanging out with me on a Friday afternoon. I know you've got another call coming up here. I think we could keep going for a while, of course, delving into all types of fun stuff. But if we do one more, let's do one last question here, and we're going to go for predictions. Any large predictions of where AI will be? Let's say this time next year, so 12 months from now. Do you think anything that you're sort of like, this is going to happen? Anything that's you're thinking about?
Wow. Right now, making predictions about AI is might be a bit of a fool's errand, but why not? Like, uh,
It's Friday. It's Friday.
exactly.
Let's
It's
have some
Friday.
fun.
Yeah,
Why not? It's
exactly.
it's
Yeah.
Friday.
So I think in a year, I think, okay, so it's okay. What current LLMs are not particularly good at is true reasoning, like real logic. I think, and this is between think and hope, that while I'm not saying that they will achieve like, human level of like awareness or anything, no, but I think a year from now, we will have an LLM that will be whose ability to reason and reason, like, really kind of build pretty long chains of logical arguments, will be significantly better, like, different by degree from what we
Mm-hmm.
see today. And this will yet again open another kind of a new family of use cases that will be possible to build with them. And in a year, I might be completely wrong, and no logic will be there, but the style will be better.
Well, I do hope we don't go a year without talking again. I'm sure we will either get back on here or at least catch up here in the near future. But again, very much appreciate you hanging out with me today on the podcast. This was a ton of fun, and one of these days we'll do it again. So enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Tyler, thank you so much. It's been really, really fun. Thank you.
Cool. Stop.